Friends, please be seated. You know, I have to make an observation about Father's Day as opposed to Mother's Day. Mother's Day is that day when mothers say to their families, the only thing I want today is for my whole family to go to church with me. But fathers, the only thing they say is, the only thing I want is that I don't have to go to church today. Jesus said, "See, I am sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves." He also says, "Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." Mark Twain said, "There are basically two kinds of people in the world. People who accomplish things and people who claim to have accomplished things. The first group is less crowded." Let's be honest. There aren't just two kinds of people in the world. In reality, there are two kinds of people living within us. We suffer from a kind of dualistic Jekyll and Hyde condition called the human condition. We are both saint and sinner, heroine and villain, trusting and incredulous, surrendering and controlling. Sometimes we live in God's kingdom, and sometimes we don't. The opposing forces which live within me are inextricably bound up into the experience of what I call my life. Now, the great adventure of this life is when we get on the path with Jesus, when we embark on a journey to understanding who we are and what we're all about, what makes us tick, what gives us joy, what springs up love from our hearts, when we acknowledge the truth of who we are and what we are, that we are created in the very image of our Creator and have the potential for love and good, and yet we also bear the scars of the slings and arrows of self-inflicted wounds that keep us from living the lives the Creator intended for us. We acknowledge that we are a mixed bag. We are, all of us, the S in mess. We are complicated and sometimes problematic. We can no better separate the many aspects of our inner lives, our inner selves, as we can separate the myriad body parts that make up our outer selves. We know better than to dismiss the sinner in favor of the saint. We aren't that simplistic, and life is more complicated than that. The great Russian writer Alexander Solzhenitsyn put it like this: "If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart?" Jesus himself tells us that we must be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. In another gospel story, Jesus admonishes his disciples, the presumed children of light, to be shrewder in dealing with their earthly affairs, just like the children of the world do. It seems that even Jesus acknowledges the duplicitous and dualistic nature of the human condition, though he doesn't seem to judge it as all bad or even all good, as a matter of fact. like Jesus is wont to do for us at every turn, and which he demonstrates with a bleeding woman, with blind men, and the demon-possessed, he helps us to see the truth of who we are and to face that truth with dignity. Jesus seems to find a way to do for us that which we can't do for ourselves, to hold the serpent and the dove in a kind of accepting tension as the innate and complex nature of the human heart. But he also helps us to integrate these splintered aspects of our inner selves within a coherent narrative in which we are not simply branded as bad and wrong or righteous and good and deserving. Rather, with compassion and tenderness, he sees us as the harassed and helpless creatures that we have become. But instead of condemning, he is constantly and compassionately representing and renewing the human condition according to the compassion and tenderness of his Father. He reminds us with every miracle, with every touch, with every word, that we were created good and were intended from the beginning to be integrated and whole, inside and out. Now, our human condition, the way that it is, we usually stand in the way of this reintegrating, of this renewing work when we approach the world and each other with such binary worldview, which separates black and white, good and evil, elephants and donkeys, 8 o'clockers and 10:15ers. And when we stand in the way of love, integrating love, we suffer. For none of us is all good and all evil. For that matter, not one of us can be completely and utterly known. Our inner thoughts, our inner fears and dreams, the totality of what it is to be you and me cannot be fully understood based simply on the color of our skin or our station in life or by which service we attend or which political party we support. On the contrary, it is by the content of our character and the actions which flow from such character, which demonstrate to the world a nuanced indication of who we are and what are the contents of our dreams and our hopes and our fears. When we are able to recognize and acknowledge the conflicted nature of human beings, beginning with ourselves, we can also recognize the truth of our shared potential for goodness. We begin to see that we share more than our conflict. We share human dignity because we are all created with the image of God stamped upon our souls. When we recognize that all of us are sheep and wolves, serpents and doves, all of us yearning to be the whole people God intended us to be, we begin to see that we are not so different, you and I. For God makes the rain to fall on the good as well as the evil, on the serpents as well as the doves. Now, when we follow this Jesus way, when we follow closely behind our rabbi, Jesus shows us the way to be whole. He shows us the way of integration. He gives us the courage and the permission to express on the outside who we truly are on the inside, without prejudice and without shame. He gives us the freedom to be the people God intended us to be from the beginning. Jesus doesn't hold a grudge or put conditions on his love. Rather, he proves his love for us in that while we were still serpents and wolves and sinners and doves, Jesus gave his life for us. And as we seek to follow Jesus, God's winnowing fork does its work in our own inner fields, pruning and clearing, and we slowly begin to choose what is right and what is just. Not according to the Kardashians or to the political pundits of the day, but according to the one who built us for love. When we, like the Israelites, wandering in the Sinai desert from this morning's reading, have learned to answer as one, that everything the Lord has spoken, we will do, only then we begin to choose the way of love. And as we choose love over and over, we obtain more and more access to the power of God doing for us and through us that which we cannot do for ourselves, giving us the grace and power to love unconditionally, serve compassionately, and pouring ourselves out for one another, loving our neighbor, praying for our enemies, blessing all without condition or expectation of reciprocity. We begin to truly live according to our prayer, that God's will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That is, God's will be done on this earth, right here, starting with me, within this heart, as it is meant by God to be. Now, to separate the wheat from the weeds, the good people from the bad people, the righteous ones from the evil ones, would, as Solzhenitsyn says, require us to destroy a piece of our own hearts. That is not God's call to us. And besides, it's God's job to judge, not ours. That work belongs solely to God, who is much better suited to the task. God is the farmer who abundantly scatters the seed, the farmer who tends to our fields and reaps when it is time. We must always remember that which is our work and that which is God's. And we must not confuse the two. Our calling is to help spread the seeds of God's love in word and deed, and to tend to our own hearts first, and those of our neighbors second, and to labor in the fields to harvest that which God gives us, trusting God with the outcome. It is not our job to judge. It is not our job to weed out or selectively scatter or to discriminately harvest. It is our job to sow the seeds of love. And when the time is right, to gather up the harvest, following God's lead. And as we share in God's work, may God's will be done on this earth and within this heart, as it is in heaven.